Welcome back to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and I am here with just me today. That is right, it's only me, and I'm going to be doing something slightly different. We're going to be going through and building out the Dragon Shepherd Monk, the subclass that the community decided to pick when we did our big community build a couple months ago. And after going through and looking through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suggestions, I have a handful of some of my best options here suggested by you, the community. And now I'm going to take those suggestions and go through the process of building out the beginning of the subclass. We'll start by just kind of, it's going to be a lot of me reiterating and changing. I don't know which one I should be looking at this point, but it's going to be a lot of me changing and reiterating. We'll do a little swap back and forth. As I kind of go through and figure out what I think works. You can kind of get a little behind the scenes of how these subclasses were made and some of the balancing issues I have to go through, and we'll kind of just deal with it together. Whatever you see at the end of this episode may or may not be exactly what makes it into the playtest material, but it'll at least get you an idea of how I got there. Right now I've got my computer in front of me, as you can see, a computer, and I'm just going to go through editing in a Google Doc, and we're going to go through the process, and you won't see my exact screen potentially, but you'll see something like it, and you'll be able to see the kind of stuff that I'm working on. But yeah, let's just jump into it. I'll try to talk as much as I can to explain what my thought process is. But the first thing I always do when I jump into building out a subclass is I go in and I find other subclass abilities, right? So it looks like the monk has, 1, 2, 3, 4, a 9 or 10 here, different subclasses. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to grab one that I think is fairly well balanced as like a good jumping off point for us to utilize in our own space. Now, I know of the monks, there's a handful of them that are more or less popular. I know that Way of the Shadow tends to be a generally popular monk subclass. So I'm going to go through and look at that as one of my starters. I also know that there's a handful that I might tend to stick away from. Not to say that they aren't great. I'm not trying to poop on anyone's parade. That's not the right saying, right? No one says poop on parades. What's the saying? I don't know. I'm not trying to do that. But and I know that Way of the Four Elements is something I'm going to avoid this time around. So on my end, I've just went into D&D Beyond. I've gone ahead and copied and pasted the abilities. It looks like, on Monk's ends here, they only get four to five abilities. So they get something at 3rd level, 6th level, 11th level, and 17. And so what we're going to do is plan for those different ability caps based off of, our like core flavor. So I've got Way of the Shadow here. I might go over and pick out another thing. Let's see. Drunken Master, I also know is fairly popular and people really enjoy this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Drunken Master as well as just a good jumping off point here. And so now we have the Drunken Master and we've got, that's wrong. We'll get rid of this. We've got the Drunken Master and we've got the Shadow Monk. And so going through here, we can kind of see, and I can kind of distill some of these things. So in the Shadow Monk, we start at 3rd level with a ability to duplicate the effects of certain spells. So at 3rd level, the Shadow Monk gets the concept of being able to cast Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without a Trace, Silence, and Minor Illusion. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and mark this as kind of like a core concept ability. So at 3rd level, the Shadow, at 3rd level, the Shadow Monk gets utility-based options. So this is a very utility-based situation here, right? Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without a Trace, Silence, Minor Illusion. Those all are really flavorful. right? They're very utility based. They help the monk move in shadow and be stealthy, right? That works really well within the shadow space. So now I know, at least in this subclass build, that the 3rd level ability should be, not combat oriented. We're going to go through some of these other ones and make sure that that's consistent, but this is a good way that I use to start. So then going into Shadow Step, which is their 6th level ability, this is the ability to step from one shadow into another via teleportation and dim light and darkness. It's a bonus action, and it's a 60 feet teleportation space. So it's basically Misty Step that you can do for free into limited areas. This is the core ability of the Shadow Monk, and I know that that's the reason most people play it. So at 6th level for the Shadow Monk, you get a very flavorful ability, and you also get the core ability, at least here. And this is also utility, right? So this is no combat yet, right? Nothing that's been given to the Shadow Monk is going to be dealing extra damage or making you more effective. Now, there is a small combat effect, right? You get advantage on the first melee attack you make before the end of your turn. So I'm going to say utility, and then I'm going to put a little minor section, minor combat. So that's just for me to go back on. Now, I'm not going to let any of you see my actual screen because when I type, I misspell everything and I have to go back and redo it all because I type way too fast, and then it's not great. So there's that. Going into the 11th level ability, you have learned to become one with the shadows. You are in the area of dim light or darkness. You can use an action to become invisible. You remain invisible until you attack or cast a spell. Wow, this is a lot of utility-based options here. And we'll see if that's consistent with the other ones here. So at 11th, you turn invisible. Again, it's very stealthy. It's very utility-based. Cloak of Shadows, the ability to turn invisible, is not as strong as the 6th level ability. So I'm going to say, as far as strength level goes, there's kind of this core ability at 6. The next ability that comes after at 11th, it does not nearly compare to the utility of the other one. Being dim light and being able to turn invisible is something that occurs, but I think is a bit pedantic when in utilization, because you're just gonna have to be questioning whether you're in darkness the entire time, and so it's gonna lead to either people over asking and or not asking enough and not utilizing their ability. So then at 17th, you can exploit a creature's momentary distraction. When a creature within 5 feet of you is hit by an attack made by a creature other than you, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against that creature. All right, so this is finally at 17th, a combat ability, and I would say not at all flavorful. 17th is a combat ability that I don't think does much in way of adding to the flavor of being a shadowy monk. So based off of the Shadow Monk's build, it goes utility, very flavorful, core ability, very flavorful, 17th, flavor but not as strong, still utility, and the last one being a 17th level combat ability that kind of feels like it could be added to any monk space. So then we're going to jump over to the Drunken Master. So at Drunken Master, the third level, you gain the proficiency bonus in the performance skill if you don't already have it. And then your martial arts technique mixed with combat training, precision dancer, and antics of a jester. You gain proficiency in brewer supplies. So it looks like you get 2 third-level abilities here in this version. One of them is going to be very, very flavorful and very flavorful at third, but also small, right? A minor flavor is what I will write down, but hopefully everyone gets what that is. So at third level, you get a minor flavor that's pretty unconsequential. Like, it's just not that important. It's going to be great for like role-playing side of things, but mechanically it's not going to alter your play style too much, right? Being able to brew beer is cool, and it's going to be able to add a lot of stuff and a lot of oomph behind your character, especially with the flavor of it being a drunken master, but it's not going to actively make you an expert combat person by being able to brew a yeasty beer in the middle of combat, right? So the next thing is at third level, you get Drunken Technique. So we get 2 options at third. You can twist and turn quickly as part of your Flurry of Blows. When you use Flurry of Blows, you gain the benefits of the disengage action, and your walking speed increases by 10 feet. So this is combat oriented, right? So at third level here, you get a flavor combat ability, right? This is not the most heavy combat because you're not dealing more damage, but you are getting extra movement and you're getting the disengage. And those are locked in to combat specific because you have to activate Flurry of Blows. And so, yeah, third level. So, with the Drunken Master, we're getting a minor flavor ability at third level and we're getting a minor combat ability at third level. The next thing here is at 6th level. You get a couple options here, it looks like. You can move in a sudden, swaying way. You gain the following benefits. Leap to your feet. When you're prone, you can stand up by spending 5 feet of your movement rather than half your movement. Okay, so you get part of the athlete feat, and then you also get redirect attack. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can spend 1 key point as a reaction to cause the attack to hit one other creature of your choice. Okay, so that means at 6th level, you are getting a flavorful combat ability. And this is full stop combat, right? Now you're dealing damage. You're stopping damage from hitting you. Well, no, you're not. You're dealing damage and you're getting a little bit of utility. I'm going to say combat/utility because standing up while being prone doesn't necessarily need to be used in combat. It can be used outside of it as well. All right. So then... Excuse me as I drink my apricot flavored Red Bull. So crisp, so fresh. Sponsor us, Red Bull. Starting at 11th level, you always seem to get lucky. You always seem to get a lucky bounce at the right moment. Is that the right word? You always seem to get a lucky bounce right at the moment. And you make an ability check, an attack roll, or saving throw, and have disadvantage on your roll. You can spend 2 key points to cancel the disadvantage. So this is interesting, right? This is a core utility. I'd say it's very flavorful, right? Being like a drunkard who is able to get out of a situation even though they probably didn't deserve it or shouldn't have. So utility, combat, and then very flavorful, right? For their 11th level ability. And then finally here, Intoxicated Frenzy at 17th level, you gain the ability to make an overwhelming number of attacks against a group of enemies. When you use Flurry of Blows, you can make up to 3 additional attacks with it for a total of 5 Flurry of Blow attacks, provided that each Flurry of Blows is against a different creature. Okay, so 17th level is very, very combat heavy, right? So we have done 2 different subclasses and kind of broken down what those subclasses look like and kind of how their structure works. So with the Shadow Monk, we have a 3rd level flavor that's utility based. We have another flavorful utility core ability at 6th level. At 11th level, we have another utility ability that's all stealth. And then finally at 17th level, we have 1 combat that I would say is not necessarily attached to the shadow part of the Shadow Monk. And then with the Drunken Master, we have a minor ability, 2 minor abilities, one being combat, the other one being all flavor, right? There's no utility. I mean, there is a little bit of utility, but it's really about the role-playing side of things. And then at 6th level, it's a combat/utility ability, right? And that seems to be a pretty consistent thing. You get a little bit of combat, you get a little bit of utility. That happens also in the 11th level. And then finally in the 17th level ability, it's very, very combat heavy. So these are 2 different directions that the monk subclass has been taken in. And now when looking at our subclass, we can kind of decide what, using our flavor, what we might end up shifting towards. And right off the bat, I think the dragon shepherd being based off of the sheep dragon should probably lean more utility based, right? Lots of flavor, very heavy utility. The sheep dragon has ways to attack people, but it's normally to escape, right? They're very nimble. They're not going to go and they're not hunters, right? They're usually being chased by other creatures. They have a natural predator called the hill dragon, which they have to escape and get away from this thing. And so when making a monk subclass that is a shepherd of these things who gain some of the abilities that they might have, I definitely think leaning utility is the right option. All right, so pardon me, everyone. I forgot I have to use this over here. Hold on, everyone, just to let you know, we don't have Adam and Ari here, but I do have the soul of Adam trapped in a little tiny robot box. Adam, can I just get your opinion really quick? Oh man, if this doesn't work, if you can't hear this and it's just me talking to non-existent Adam, I'm going to look crazy. Adam, what do you think of my analysis of how to build a subclass? Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so he made a great point there. Yeah, couldn't agree more, Adam. Sorry, can you? What did you say again?
Like you didn't guard the thing, and then they're like, no, Cyanide, please.
Okay, great. Good to know. Yeah. Sorry, Adam. He's guiding me from a distance. He's up in Seattle looking down on me, helping me do this podcast on my own. Oh no, this might not be a good idea. I think I'm going to spiral, Miles. I'm going to spiral. So now that we have this base locked down, we understand what we're going for, I think we should start by looking at some of these interesting concepts that were given to us by the community. Okay, so some of these are just, after looking through a bunch of the options, these are just some of the concepts that people gave us that I thought really worked well. So these might not make it in there, but it's something for us to jump off of here. So people are suggesting a ram ability. So someone that does like a running start, but can knock enemies hit by the prone, or knock and hit enemies prone if they fail a strength or dexterity check. Right. So I think perhaps this is more oriented towards, like a goat than, sheep's definitely ram as well. So, this is moving into that kind of sheep direction. But one of the abilities that the sheep dragon has is this kind of movement knock prone ability, where if they dash past you in this kind of this quick movement, they pull wind along with them. You could almost imagine like at the tail end of a sheep dragon, there's this like spiraling wind that's chasing after them. They generate this force, and so as they shift by or move by an enemy, that enemy might fall prone. And so I definitely think that is a really fun, flavorful ability, especially with the monk being so fast, for them to access some sort of movement knocking prone ability. I think is really smart. I think that's potentially a 3rd level or a 6th level ability. That's for something for us to find out. This other one is when an ally is within 90 feet, but out of your field of vision, drops below 10 hit points, use a reaction to teleport them to another space you can see out of the way of danger. Now, teleporting is a little out of pocket for this this character, right? The sheep dragon doesn't necessarily have any teleporting abilities, but what I really, really like about this is this concept of the sheep dragon shepherd being able to sense his allies like he would sense his sheep, right? So the idea of someone's getting hurt nearby, you can kind of like, you have this bond, this connection with them, and you can do something to help them. I don't think teleporting them is necessarily the right action, but perhaps you being able to run to their side, like you being able to take a free action or a reaction to, move your movement in their direction is something that's potentially really interesting and cool. Another option is this kind of like this wind, this kind of control of the wind that the sheep dragons tend to have could be something fun. I'm not quite sure there, but I think that concept, there's something there. The next thing is an option. This one said, this person suggests that you spend a key point per target and have all willing friendly creatures within 15 feet of you move to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you as you call them back to safety. This is another thing in that kind of space that I think works really well. So this is like this is kind of cool. This is like an action where you can have creatures that are within a distance of you, and you can spend a key point per creature to have them move out of turn towards you. So you're spending your action to kind of draw them closer to you. I think that's really cool. I think having a monk that can kind of control the battlefield and move people off turn is really, really interesting. Now with the key point, they're saying key point per creature. I think perhaps one of the things that could happen is you might be able to only target one creature, but the amount of key points you spend allows them to move a certain amount of feet. And then maybe later in the game, at higher levels, you can target multiple creatures with this ability. Because otherwise, at a very low level, it might get a little strange for you to be able to manipulate 10 people or 5, allies or something like that at the same time. That being said, it's something we'd have to play around with, but again, works well in this space. Okay, this is interesting. So this is another ability by a different person. Sheep dragons have a herd, so it would make sense for the monk to be able to protect an ally close to them with a reaction, like a shared defense against something like a missile. I think that's also great, right? We're fitting in this kind of, you can very clearly see that the direction the community took this was very defensive, and that makes sense as a shepherd. I like that concept. I like this idea of maybe as a reaction, you have a defensive ability that you can't use against yourself, but maybe against an ally. And that's really cool because now you can kind of chain some of these things, right? By utilizing perhaps the ability prior to this, you could move an ally to you, which then allows you to protect them with reactions later down the line. I think that's really interesting. The next one is Wind Pistol, which is the same name that the Sheep Dragon has for their ability. And this is like the core force and combat stat for the Sheep Dragon. It's this idea that they fill their mouth full of air and they spit it out at this incredibly fast degree and shoot out these little like bullets of air, like in the direction of creatures. And the Sheep Dragon target multiple creatures. And so in this regard here, I think having Wind Pistol basically doing a similar thing for the monk is really interesting, right? Being able to mimic this attack in some capacity, right? It probably needs to scale a little bit better than the Sheep Dragons does, but I think that's very cool. Maybe it's a situation where the Wind Pistol, maybe we take that thing from earlier where you can spend key points to target more creatures and you add it into the Wind Pistol ability. I think that could potentially work where you can target many creatures by spending more key points. Then we have another person that's talking about the Rush ability for the Sheep Dragon. And yeah, it's this kind of similar situation here, inspired by the Sheep Dragon. It's a similar idea, but they kind of talk about it slightly different. It's the idea if you use your movement in a dash towards a creature, being able to make an attack at the end of that dash, followed by the ability to knock a creature prone or knock a creature 5 feet further back, which, I think also works really well. Oh no. I didn't click the puck of destiny. Okay. I'm getting off clock timing here. All right. Perfect. Take to the skies. This is the ability to jump to great heights and distances, almost defying gravity. I don't hate this, right? The sheep dragon have the ability to fly, so the monk being able to mimic that, not necessarily fly themselves, but being able to mimic that is very interesting. That's cool. I like that. I like this. They're kind of suggesting this idea of kicking off of something, but not being able to change the direction of your flying speed. So this concept of them like leaping, but once you're flying after your leap, you move in that direction for a distance, kind of like gliding, but you can't change the direction you're moving until you kick off of another object or have something to interact with, which is cool. I like that. I like you being able, like, you're going to glide and you can go further than a normal jump, but only straight, only in the line that you pick, which is interesting, right? Because then you can kind of do almost like a straight line ability that you see in a lot of creatures where you pick a straight line and you can kind of glide down that line for a while. And that's really cool. I think that's really awesome. All right. We have another one for lay down their lives, protect. So there's a bunch of stuff here. So I think I'm going to take some of these concepts and start shifting them into some of the abilities we have. I think at a low level, third level ability, having something that protects allies is really cool. So I'm going to go with this concept here that someone suggested of being able to move your allies and spend key points to move allies at your third level ability, because I think that's fairly flavorful, right? The sheep dragon or the shepherd of the sheep dragon protecting their friends makes a lot of sense. So at third level, you gain the ability to herd your allies, calling them closer to you and making it easier for you to protect them. And then we get into the core of the ability. You can spend an action. Let's say that you can spend a key point. You can spend a key point to cause a friendly, we'll just say friendly creature. Well, no. We'll say a willing, because willing makes more sense here, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be friendly, but if the creature wants to move closer to you, I guess they could. You can spend a key point to cause a willing creature, and now we have to give it a distance. So it has to be far enough for it to make sense. I'm going to say, call it closer. You can make it easier to. Okay. You can spend a key point to cause a willing creature that you can see within 60 feet. Within 60 feet of you. To move, let's just say 10 feet in your direction. Right? So that's the core of the ability. Now, 10 feet might not be enough. I'm not quite sure there. This is where playtest comes, right? This is where I can give kind of a core concept based off of what I think makes sense and what isn't too broken. Now, 10 feet might not be enough, right? It's a singular key point. It's third level. 15 feet might make the most sense. But at the same time, you have to be careful. You have to be careful here, right? 15 feet, you don't want them moving 60 feet not on their turn. That just is, I think that breaks this a little bit. It's a little too powerful. So you either do 10 feet and you let them spend a lot of key points. I could say 10 feet in your direction, move 10 feet in your direction to a maximum of 30 feet. I don't know if that's needed. But I'm going to put that in there right now for safekeeping, right? I think at third level, being able to cause a creature to move 30 feet, but 3 key points, right? Key points, that's a hard one. Okay. See, this is where it's a lot of iteration on my end. I'm going to keep it to 15 feet, and I'm going to say to a maximum of 45, right? And we'll see if that's worth it. I know my mechanical editor is going to tell me I'm dumb because 45 feet is not a standard unit, right? 60 feet's a standard unit. So he's going to tell me either pick 60 or pick 30. but I'm going to leave it at 45 because that feels right now. So, and then beyond that, let's see here. Let's say starting, and we're going to do a couple different things. Starting at 6th level, I could have it. Here's the other thing. I could have it, pardon me, everyone. I could have it jump not on the standard subclass options here, right? So standard subclass leveling abilities would be at 6th, 11th, and 17th. So I could say at 6th level, you can target 2 creatures with this. At 17th level or 11th level, you can target 3. And at 17th, you can target 4. Or I can switch it to a off-kilter leveling system. So that would be 5th, 10th, and 15th, which means you'd be getting a little bonus off of the standard. And I actually like that. I think that's more preferable. At 5th level, you can target one additional creature with this ability. Starting at higher levels, actually, I'll rephrase this. I'm also terrible at this. Starting at higher levels, you can target one additional creature with this ability. At fifth level, you can target 2 creatures. 10th level, 3, 15th level, 4. Okay. So now looking at that, we can kind of go back and readjust. So now we need to understand that at 3rd level, moving a creature at 15 feet with a key point is okay, but not the best. At 5th level, moving 2 creatures 15 feet makes me a little anxious. So I'm almost wondering if we switch back to 10 feet, and I'm going to switch this to 30, and just knowing that this ability will grow in strength over time. By 5th level, being able to move 2 creatures 10 feet using a singular key point is pretty strong, and maybe too strong. We'll find out. But I like that as a first level ability, or not third, or first, subclass ability, starting at 3rd level. So now let's jump into 6th level, beginning at 6th level. Now here's where we can jump in a couple different options here. We can do another utility base, or we can add a little combat into our utility. And I think adding a little combat into our utility is probably the option we want to go with. I know a lot of people, for D&D, a lot of people like combat. That's the reason they play the game. Obojima is a little bit different, but it's not to say that combat doesn't exist. So, these monks would have to protect their sheep. So they'll need something there. And I think adding it into the core ability makes the most sense. So let's see here. For combat, I think it perhaps makes the most sense to have this sheep dragon like wind oriented ability. I think having the wind pistol, like a mimicry of the wind pistol, isn't necessarily terrible. So starting at 6th level, we start with some flavor at the beginning, a flavor sentence. Starting at 6th level, you gain the ability to mimic the sheep dragon's wind pistol. Blasting enemies with powerful gale forces, right? We might change that later, but this is something that kind of describes the ability, right? So beginning at 6th level, you gain the ability to mimic the sheep dragon's wind pistol, blasting enemies with powerful gale forces at a distance. That's the important thing, right? Is that this monk can do something from a distance, doesn't necessarily need to get right up against somebody. Now, I think changing the core ability of the sheep dragon, which is just blasting enemies with this kind of powerful bolt, I think making it a little more utility based and adding in some pushback, right? I don't think, based off of the way this is going, I'm going to be able to also add in the sheep dragon's ability to like knock people prone and pull wind. So instead, I'm going to combine that core ability of the sheep dragon into the wind pistol and allow you to knock people around using these wind pistol blasts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back and find the sheep dragon statistics. I need the sheep dragon statistics so I can figure out how exactly wind pistol works so I can use it to mimic. All right, where's the sheep dragon? There it is. So cute and cuddly. So, wind pistol. All right. Right, so the way this works is the sheep dragon can do two things. The sheep dragon makes 2 attacks, one with its bite and one with its headbutt. Alternatively, it makes 3 wind pistol attacks, right? So the wind pistol attacks work exactly like this. I'm just copy and paste. They are a ranged attack for sheep dragons plus 5 to hit. It's 100 and 200 feet for the ranges. So 100 feet, it's a standard attack. Within 200 feet, it's at disadvantage. They target one creature, and it's a 1d4 plus 3, right? So they're not the strongest, but they, they're a ranged attack, and the sheep dragon can make a lot of them. And so I think something similar makes sense here, right? But let's also try to tie this into potentially flurry of blows, right? So there's already an ability that lets the monk make multiple attacks called flurry of blows. So let's see how oh. You're kidding me. Oh, okay. Whew. I just closed the window and I was like, oh my gosh, it's gone. It is not gone. It's still there. I'm just not used to this laptop. What do you think, Adam?
Crabs are just always ready to fight you.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so going into the flurry of blows options here, let's see how it works. Okay, flurry of blows. After you make an attack action on your turn, you can spend 1 key point to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. Okay, now I think there's a monk that lets you do your flurry of blows at a distance. If I were doing this not on camera, I would spend a bunch of time reading through subclasses until I found the one that lets you do it at a distance. But for now, we're going to make our own, and I can always compare later. The big thing is comparing existing, right? Like if I can give any advice about building a subclass and this opportunity, you have to compare what exists, because if you don't, then you will either underpower your subclass or overpower your subclass. And so, yeah, I in reality, I would go back and find something that does this similar thing. Actually, that being said, I do think it's Way of the 4 Elements, so I'm going to check that really quick. You reach unarmed strike. So Flames of the Tendril Snake lets you, Earth Fire Snake lets you shoot out your unarmed strikes 10 feet further, which is kind of similar. Here we go. Fist of Unbroken Air, you can blast a compressed air that strikes the mighty fist. So this is pseudo similar to something that already exists. So I think rather than letting you spend 2 key points to choose a creature within 30 feet of you, and that creature takes 3d10 bludgeoning damage plus an extra one. This is good because we can see here, this is kind of similar to what we were talking about. The Way of the 4 Elements has a standard ability that lets you shoot blasts of wind and deals damage and knocks creatures prone, right? Wow, this is an incredibly powerful ability. What level is this? This has to be something crazy high, right? Is just a very powerful ability. Okay, you create a blast of compressed air that strikes like a mighty fist. As an action, you can spend 2 key points and choose a creature within 30 feet of you. The creature must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 3d8 bludgeoning damage plus 1 extra 1d10 bludgeoning damage for each additional key point you spend. You can push the creature up to 20 feet from a knock prone. On successful, the creature takes half damage, and you don't push them. Okay. So this is like a save or suck kind of, not save or suck, but this is like a save style ability. More similar to a spell than an actual attack, right? So I think for us to be different, right, to kind of take a similar concept but still be unique, I think we really focus on the concept of us blowing this, like spitting this out like a bullet from our mouth, and doing multiple attacks here. So I think what we can do is, beginning at 6th level, you gain the ability to mimic the Sheep Dragon's wind pistol, blasting enemies with powerful gale forces at a distance. So we're going to say when you take the flurry of blows action, you can choose to make your unarmed strikes. How would you necessarily say this? When you take the flurry of blows action, is it an action? Let's go back and make sure that's true. This is the not so. Hold on. What does Adam have to say?
And it's like, hey, buddy. And it's like, oh, you're a Dara. You're cool. And then next thing
Yeah. Agreed, Adam. Agreed. This is the part of it where it's just a lot of double checking. You just have to go through and confirm certain things. So let's see. I don't think it's an action, so I don't think I should be calling it an action, but I'm pretty sure it's just a thing you can do with key. So immediately after you take the attack action, you can spend 1 key point to make 2 unarmed strikes against as a bonus action. So for us, we will say when you use flurry of blows. So it's not an action. When you use flurry of blows, the question here is, can we produce more wind bullets, or can we produce higher damage wind bullets? I'm more inclined to say that you can produce more, right? But the issue is then you're rolling a ton of attacks, and that's not necessarily fun. So something tells me that when you do this action, it should deal more damage, but I also think there should be utility aspects of this. So rather than trying to write this out, because this is already taking way longer than I thought it was going to, I'm going to kind of go with the general concepts of these. And so instead, rather for this ability, you might see bullet points on this. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to finish it out for you. But the concept I'm thinking is you're replacing your 2 unarmed strikes with these wind bullets. These wind bullets deal more damage. At this moment, they're going to do, right now they're doing D6. I think they double your damage. I think the way you could do this is you double your unarmed strike damage. So now they're doing 2d6. At later levels, they'll do 2d8 and 2d10. I also think that their distance should be 160/120, right? So that's how far you can shoot them. I think you might be, for this concept for utility, I think it'd be interesting if you could also negate the damage and instead push creatures with these as an option as well, both as like an allied creature and non-allied creature. So yeah, maybe there's some sort of big pushing effect here. I don't hate this concept of being pushed a number of feet rounded up to the closest 5 equal to the damage taken. I think that's interesting. So then that kind of the distance you push also levels and scales. So, on average, that's 10 feet with on average, that's 10 feet at 6th level, and then that would jump up to would still only be 10 feet, so that doesn't scale well. I don't know, we'll play around with it, but some sort of pushing and prone ability, right? Knocking a creature prone, pushing them a certain amount of feet. But what's another thing that could potentially make this more unique? There's also a chance that I split this 6th level ability and I make it maybe a little less powerful, but then have a secondary utility based ability at 6th level. I don't hate that either. Yeah, maybe that's the move. So the issue is this is just very similar to this other ability. And so rather than trying to mimic and change it, even though that's happens to be what the Sheep Dragon can do, I think I'm going to potentially add a secondary 6th level ability. And make it some sort of glide ability or another utility-based thing, similar to what we were talking about earlier. That being said, I realized this just takes a lot of time, and we're already at our hour mark here. And so with this, I hope this gives an amount of insight as to how these things are designed. I know this last section kind of came off the rails here, but the reality is, the first thing I type is not the right answer. I almost always have to go and reiterate and change and shift and maneuver to try to find something that works. And sometimes I'll design something and I'll sit on it, right? I'll just let it sit and then come back and alter that ability completely differently, because you just need time to think about the concept. Right now, I'm utilizing pre-existing concepts from some of the amazing ideas that you, as the community, had. And so I'm trying to shift those down into something that works and at the same time build something that isn't, derivative of another monk subclass, which, is sometimes hard to do. A lot of subclasses cover a lot of options. With that being said, even though you did not see the entire creation of this subclass, I think you at least got to see a little bit. If this is something that you're interested in, you want to see more subclass builds like this, maybe we can bring Adam in, or Ari and Adam to kind of jump in and help us. Of course, Adam was already here.
Like you didn't guard the thing, and then they're like, no, please.
That's the same one. Hold on, let's get it.
People are like running off of cliffs and like, woo,
Okay, that makes more sense, Adam. People are running off cliffs. The point is if I were to finish this on camera, it'd take a while. So if this is something you want to see more of, maybe I can be a little more prepared, have a little more have some things put together, not do this whole D&D Beyond shuffle and stuff like that. But I wanted to give you the beginning breakdown of how I do some of this stuff. So I figured it was important to show at least this first time. All of that being said, thank you so much for joining us. You can check out the... actually, I'm not sure if this will be available. I think it'll be available for a playtest by the time you jump onto it. But if not, check out some of the other amazing things that are available for playtest. Thank you so much for joining us. Very excited. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled podcast very soon. You can check us out on Discord and Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon, YouTube, all of those other great things. Thank you so much for joining me today. And,
Autobots, roll out.